Hey guys, I have a new video to share with you. But first, I went to go get some boba because this is my guilty pleasure. And this is a sunset green tea with honey boba, light ice. And we're going to go return some library books. I'm going to grab my son some food because he's hungry. And then I'm going to find a quiet place to tell you guys how God changed my desires in the last 3 years. Okay, so we are at our local library. We're gonna go return some books and find a spot to sit and record. And I wanna show you this super cool bus. They're currently fixing up our library. They're doing like a roof repair. So right now they have a bus that has books on it. So it's super cool, like really makes me wanna live on a bus filled with books. And I'm so excited because they let me take a little picture, but I took a video instead. Cool library bus. I want one of these. It's so cool. Dang it. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna go sit down somewhere and record. How does this even work? Got my microphone on. I think it's on. Okay, so it's nice and chilly out. Just a few days ago, it was like in the 80s and super hot, and now it's cold and I'm wearing a million sweaters. So the other day, I woke up early in the morning and God put something on my heart, and I just heard, this whole message. And first thing I did was just type it up on my phone because I don't just grab my phone first thing in the morning and record. My mind is like, let me write this down, organize it, and then I can, see if I want to actually talk about it. Well, after I typed it up on my phone, I printed it. And here's how much it is. It is 3.5 pages. 3.5 pages. And I'm like, how am I going to summarize all this? And then the next day, I had this much. And it just keeps happening. So I don't know what I'm going to do going forward. Am I just going to record in the morning? I'm not sure. But I'm going to try my best to just summarize this because otherwise I'll never record, okay? So this video is how God changed my desires in the last 3 years that I have been seeking him. So growing up, I always just wanted to be rich and successful and live in LA and have a cute Yorkie, the typical stuff you see on TV with celebrities. Well, that never obviously worked out. I did end up living in LA for a year, actually for a couple of years, but never ever the way I wanted. There's a lot of people walking by because there's a voting booth there and people are just dropping off their ballots. So it's kind of annoying. Okay, so in around 2020, this has to be like a separate video on how God humbled me. But in 2020, my business was doing really well. And I became kind of like, part of me was torn because other people were suffering and working so hard and losing their jobs. And I was just thriving. So part of me felt guilt for my success. But then the other part of me was just like, oh, I'm going to get a fancy car now and I'm going to pay off all my debt and get a house. Like I had all these big superficial goals, I guess you could say. And once I started to really notice God and, read the Bible and all that stuff, I started to actually seek being humble. And I like being around people who are humble as well, because that is what Jesus did in the Bible. He didn't have a house. He just traveled in sandals and whatever he had on his back, and he relied on other people to feed him and to give him a place to sleep. he really put himself in like servant level. And so I just wanted to become more like that and more humble. So another thing during 2020 is I started to really want to learn how to grow my own food and be more self-sustainable, because you know they closed a lot of stuff down, and it was a huge awakening for a lot of people who rely on food deliveries or groceries and fast food restaurants. A lot of people like don't know how to cook. Most people don't know how to grow food, how to survive in the wild, how to hunt. And I was really, it really made me want to be able to survive in case something like that happened. And it brought me back to just like our ancestors and how our family lived for thousands of all of our families, how they survived without grocery stores. And you know, they all had to hunt their food and fish, and everything was made from scratch. Like my grandma used to tell me that they used to churn their own butter, and that used to always fascinate me, you know, because we've become so spoiled in America and a lot of other countries where everything's just done for you. And I think that's it's it's cool that we have that, but it's also a disadvantage because it's making us dumber, because we just, if there was a true like shutdown of the world, most of us would not make it. So anyway, so I started to try and grow like vegetables and stuff on my patio, but a lot of it would just die because you need the perfect soil, you need perfect amount of shade and sun, and my patio does not have a good. Okay, I just switched to cinematic, so everything in the background will be blurry. So the gardening thing did not work out, okay? But it's still something that I never forgot about. I started to crave like living somewhere outside of California, having acres of land, being able to grow food, having chickens, having, you know, I don't know about cows, but like, you know, or bartering or trading with people like in the old days. And a lot of people still do that today. You know, if I have chickens, I could trade my eggs for the milk that my neighbor might have, or I have fruit, they have vegetables, that kind of thing. I grew up in New York. I lived in New York for 19 years, and for those 19 years, I've always dreamed of living in California, in sunny California. I hate the cold, and I just wanted to live like, you know, luxurious life in a tropical area, I guess. And after 2020, I started to actually be pulled towards living somewhere else, living maybe near mountains or a lot of trees. And I wanted to be able to live off grid. Okay, like I started watching videos on living off grid and how they collect rainwater, how they chop wood for heat, and these people just live without anything. And a lot of times they don't even have loans or bills. You can live that way because they did a lot of the work themselves. They paid for their own building material. They don't have an electric bill like they might use solar panels or gas or whatever, propane. And it doesn't cost them anything to live. And I was like, imagine a life where you don't have to go to work to survive. You have to go to work to pay for your house, go to work to pay for your car. It's such a slave system that people don't even realize that we got into. And then they keep upselling us with fancier cars and, you know, bigger houses, all this stuff that we really don't need, and all this junk food that we also don't need. We can survive on basic natural food. You know what I mean? And living in a basic little house. We don't need all the fancy furniture. We don't need the Wi-Fi. We don't need all that stuff. And I just started to really crave that, to just live like an old villager, I guess you could say. Okay, so I got sidetracked from the last topic, and I wanted to make the main point is that in the last few years, God's been pulling me to move to a completely different state with seasons and, you know, trees and snow. And I just never thought in a million years that I would want to move to another state, let alone a state a lot of people probably never even heard of, because it's kind of just tucked away in the middle of the country. And the same way I knew in my heart that I belonged in California for 19 years, I now feel like I belong in this new state, that I believe God will bring me there just like he brought me to California. I never liked working like full-time jobs. My very first full-time job was right out of college, and I very quickly hated it. I was good at my job, but there were things about it that I really hated. For one, at the time, I had really bad chronic back pain just from sitting all day long. And we worked really long hours, and we also worked weekends. They were just completely overworking us illegally. I also had chronic stomach problems that nobody really knew except like my closest friends and family maybe. And it was just like an embarrassing thing to deal with. And it was like horrible torturous pain to be at work, and I just wanted to be at home. So very early on I just started wanting to work from home, and I never really liked working. I do like having like coworkers and stuff like that, but a lot of times you're stuck with coworkers that suck and you don't get along with, and I just never really liked that. I like working like by myself, like leave me alone. I'm good with just getting the job done, you know. In 2014, when I had my son, I quit my full-time job, and I didn't work a full-time job since 2014. I had my online business. I did some work, freelance work from home. And I swore, I was like, I'll never go back to a 9 to 5. But then after 2020, which is when I started to have like, you know, a relationship with God, I was starting to learn about him. I started to like meet people here in town that were so humble, like so sweet, so generous. They would do things for me that they didn't have to do for free. I would envision myself working at this like local random store just to help out. So I started to crave actually working with people again, but in a different way, not in an office setting where I would normally work, but working like with people in a more grounded kind of way. I don't know how else to explain it, but like a basic store where I really wanted to help versus grow a career. I just wanted to help and, you know, make someone's life a little bit better or easier. Okay, another thing that God changed my viewpoint is marriage. I have not had the best relationships in the past, and some of them have kind of given me, I would say, trauma or PTSD, and I created like false beliefs as a result, right? I was not like in an abusive relationship, but if you were ever in an abusive relationship, over time you would just start believing that every man abuses his wife because that's all you know. So anyway, over time I kind of lost hope, I guess, and I just always had a bad viewpoint of men and how men are. And for the longest time, I just actually thought like I'll be alone for the rest of my life. I wanted to support myself. I wanted to have my own money. I did not want to rely on anyone because it never ended well. Every time I relied on people, they would leave me or we would break up, and then I'd have to start over. So I always just wanted to be like an independent woman, entrepreneur. And so when I started to get to know God, I started to crave being a wife, like a biblical wife, the kind of wife that takes care of her husband while, you know, when he comes home from work, or pack his lunch and, you know, rub his back when he comes home if he's sore and stuff like that, and cooking, and not necessarily being like a 1950s wife, right? I'd still want him to do things for me as well, but I really just wanted to be like a caretaker, but I also wanted to be like a full-blown homeschool mom. And for many years, I was working so much while raising my son that I didn't really get a chance to spend a lot of quality time with him. And I really started to just picture this life, like where my husband supports us. And that's something I was always against. I was always against someone else supporting me because I always had guilt when it came to that, but also I just didn't trust that would last. But here I was like, you know what? If I focus on an actual biblical marriage where you are married for the rest of your life and you rely on God to support you, I could see myself staying home with the kids, being a wife, being a mother, but also I would still have my like side thing, but it wouldn't be like, oh, I need to be an entrepreneur, I need to support myself. It would just be like, I'm there to support my husband and my family, but I could still have my art something on the side, but it wouldn't be like I'm working 12 hours a day to support myself. For the longest time that I could remember, especially like right before I got pregnant with my son, I started to really want to help people, but I just didn't know how to help people. The job that I was doing just to me never felt like it was doing anything for other people. And I always really, really, really just wanted to help other people. And I was doing graphic design for clothes. And it was a very hustle mentality. You would have like a million designs, for spring. As soon as that season is over, you'd move on to summer. And it was always just, we have to make new designs, new designs, new designs. And it just kind of felt like a rat race, and it was so draining. And I just really wanted to help people in some way. This is why I ended up starting my online business, where I would make affirmation cards to empower people, mostly women, give them confidence and self-esteem and all that kind of stuff, and self-care. And I did feel like I was helping them, but it's just not the way that God wants me to help. Once I knew God, I now wanted to help people on a different kind of level. It was more like I wanted him to use me to help people and not do it my way. I also began to see suffering in a different way. When you read the Bible, they don't promise you that you're going to have a perfect life. Jesus suffered, and a lot of the disciples and apostles suffered. And I started to see like suffering sometimes is something that you just have to do and deal with. And sometimes it's for God. And I was obsessed with being perfect and healthy, but God also humbled me in that way. And that's a whole different video on how he just really put me through so much physical pain. And that really humbled me because it showed me I was focusing on the wrong things. I started to kind of like accept suffering as part of this life, because I also now knew that there's eternity after this. So focusing on not suffering in this life was not really the point of life. We're gonna have suffering no matter how hard we try to prevent it. Jesus was the only perfect man that lived, and he healed tons and tons of people, and he still got murdered in the worst way possible. And every time I suffer, I think of that. I think of him, and I think like my suffering is nothing compared to his, and I've committed plenty of sin or reason to deserve my punishment, whereas he didn't. And ultimately, God will reward us with the kingdom of heaven if we just focus on him. Okay, there's one thing I cannot talk about. I'll have to record it later, but it's about intimacy. Okay, another thing that God started to change within me is cursing. I've always cursed a lot. And when I started to read the Bible and get to know Jesus, I would cringe every time I would hear someone curse. It just made me feel really uncomfortable. Yet at the same time, I still struggle with cursing because I have anger issues, and it's the first thing out of my mouth. And it's something I've been trying so hard, but like really struggling with. But the ironic thing is when I'm around other Christians or elderly people, I don't curse. So I know that I can change if I wanted to. Just something it's almost like I'm using that as an excuse, maybe, like, oh, well, no one's around, so I guess I could just say what I want. But I need to do like a 1-day challenge, at least try to go 1 day without cursing. Okay, Damon, I only have 3 more pages. Let's talk about movies. I never really liked watching scary, gory kind of stuff. But after I started reading the Bible and getting to know Jesus, I was more repelled by most of the stuff that they put out there. Violence, gore. I don't understand the obsession with demons and ghosts and superheroes. I feel like superheroes were created to replace God because we all want that superhero, but our superhero is Jesus. But whoever created it, all these Spider-Man and Batman, all their cool superpowers, and then everyone's wearing their t-shirts. It became this weird idolatry, and I don't get it. I don't get the obsession, but I understand why it was created, and it was 100% to pull us away from God towards some other superhero figure. If you watch a lot of the current movies, lately there's a lot of magic and portals and all this stuff that God hates. I now believe that portals are actual real, like they're real. They're demon portals. They're not like what they make it out to be on TV, where you can go through portals and magic. All this like obsession with wanting to do magic. And I think a lot of that the obsession with magic in my opinion, is us wanting to be like God, right? We want to have our own power. It's so cool. Again, it's backwards. Instead of teaching us to solely lean on God, they're teaching us you can be your own magician. You can do powers and rituals and spells, and here's your magic stick and all that stuff. Again, Hollywood and culture just push you in the opposite direction from the truth. And so this is why I just don't watch a lot of movies that come out, because they're all so fake and so boring. Like, to me, that's just fake. If I watch movies, I prefer movies that are based on like real life. Like, one of my favorite movies is The Sandlot, because it's so simple. It's just kids playing baseball. That's it. There's no magic. There's no nudity. There's no profanity. It's just, I love movies like that. And a lot of movies today don't have that. A lot of today's movies, even cartoons, have nudity. Like Despicable Me is one of our favorite cartoons, and I've noticed they try to put a naked butt into every single kids movie now. Always, someone has to be naked. It's usually from behind because it's a kids movie, but it's just they're putting it in everything now, and it's just so like, it's so annoying to me. And then, of course, adult movies. A lot of adult movies, they always have to put in, obviously there's bad language, but one thing I noticed, even like in an action movie, they always have to put an intimate scene in there, even though it has nothing to do with the movie. And it's not enough for them to just imply it, right? No, they have to show you the visual details of what some guy in the middle of the desert somehow magically meets a woman, and then showing us all the details of it, which is just like not realistic. Where did this girl come from? I would watch movies that are so action based and there's a whole like storyline to it, and then out of nowhere they throw in this intimacy scene, and I'm like, really? Like, you had to put that in there? Of course they did, because that has to be in everything. Another thing that I've noticed, one of my all-time favorite shows is Friends. And when I started, I've seen that show probably 100 times. And when I started watching it, like rewatching it not too long ago, I noticed every single episode talked about sex. And every single episode had some sort of perversion or some joke or something inappropriate. And I never noticed that before. And so God really started to open my eyes about the hidden jokes that are put into everything and hidden programming also. The only show I can now watch around my son is I Love Lucy, because there's nothing inappropriate about it. But everything else, I mean, even the Golden Girls I used to watch, and that's from the 80s. And that whole show is filled with intimacy conversations and jokes. And it's crazy how that's like the main thing people want to watch in today's culture. Oh, did I actually go through an entire page? I did. Damien, we're almost there. So what I watch now is, I actually prefer to watch now is I watch YouTube, I watch people, content creators, but I also really like Pure Flix, because the movies there are pure. There's no sexuality, there's no cursing, they're just very family friendly, and it feels so good to watch something that you don't have to hide from your kids. And that's very hard to find nowadays. Music was very hard for me to give up, because I love music. It was more of a slow progression for me. But first off, when I started to really listen to the lyrics I've been listening to since I was like 12, I never realized all these songs were all about the same thing. Again, it was about your body exploitation, money, cheating. It's all these like not positive topics. And we're singing it. I even put on the song that I used to listen to in high school, and it was a club song, and there was like this deep voice person that was like saying, dance, dance, dance with the devil. And I just was like, this was one of my favorite songs, and it never even occurred to me what I was singing and dancing to. And a lot of songs, if you listen, there's documentaries on this where they looked at all these lyrics. So many songs are talking about selling their soul to the devil. and hell and Satan. So many. So I ended up deleting a lot of pop culture music, anything that's very popular today. Um, Anyone that's performing witchcraft on stage, like what's her name, Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande and Beyonce, they're all doing rituals on stage, and a lot of stuff they talk about is very dark. People would get sick and pass out at their concerts. I mean, this is, people don't realize they're doing actual rituals and spells. And there's been artists who came out and said they were doing spells before every concert to make sure that their audience was kind of hypnotized by their music. What I listen to mostly now, like 99% of the time, is worship music, and occasionally I'll put on music that has no words at all. And on another occasion, I'll put on some old classics. But if I hear any words that, just no longer vibes with me, I'll delete it, because I still have a lot of music. I just don't listen to it. But one by one, I clear it out, and I mostly just want to listen to worship. It just makes me feel good. Food. Okay, let's talk about food. Now, I already mentioned that I've suffered with stomach problems my whole life, so I've tried all kinds of different diets, and I've tried being a vegetarian. And the main reason I tried vegetarian is because I've always felt guilt eating animals, especially when you see how certain farms treat their animals and how they are killed. It's just like so disgusting. So I've tried vegetarian diets, but like they would just be the worst diet for my body because I would just be in horrible pain. And when I read the Bible, and where Jesus says that he wants you to eat all animals that he made all unclean animals clean for you to eat, that gave me like permission to eat them, because, well, God created them for us to eat. But then I also tried the carnivore diet like 2 years ago, and it was a miracle on my body. And I posted about it on my Instagram. I dropped 20 pounds in 1 month. The amount of energy I had, I've never had in my life. I was running around doing burpees and push-ups, and I just had all this crazy energy. It was insane. And my stomach pains went away completely. So to me, the Bible only confirmed the carnivore diet. Like, I no longer eat only carnivore, but I absolutely have to eat protein every single day with fat. I also eat fat and butter. And I barely eat vegetables because they're just not good for my body. So the Bible gave me permission to eat meat, even though it's still sad. It's good for my body. So if something's good for your body, I think it was made for your body, if that makes sense. If it was not good for you, it wouldn't make you feel good. Does that make sense? Holidays. Okay. I've also changed my viewpoint on holidays, and I know a lot of people like won't really understand or agree with it, but at the end of the day, we don't have to celebrate holidays. So I don't know why people freak out when I tell them, like, I don't do Halloween anymore. I don't trick or treat. I think it's weird to go begging for candy at random people's houses when you could just go get a bag of candy. Now, dressing up, like, for me was fun, but I only did that in my 20s. I've never done trick or treating as a kid, because like we don't do that in Russia. So when we came to America, it was like a weird foreign holiday we just did not participate in. But in my 20s, it was fun. We dressed up and we would get drunk, and it was fun to go to parties and stuff. But my son never really enjoyed trick-or-treating. He would always throw all the candy away. And I was always like, why are we trick-or-treating if you don't want the candy? And for me, the only thing I enjoyed about trick-or-treating was just looking at funny costumes, or cool costumes, I guess. And to me, that's just not reason enough to celebrate it. And then, of course, if you look at the origins of the holiday, and you've got stuff like the head of the Satanic Church saying he loves Halloween because he gets Christians to worship Satan once a year, because Halloween originated as a satanic holiday. I mean, you can do your own research on that. I'm just not for that, okay? I'm not going to celebrate something that may have demonic origins, but also in my spirit, I just never really liked Halloween. So also, I mean, how weird is it that people are hanging up dead bodies all over their properties, and skeletons and skulls? Like, that's just so freaking weird and creepy, and it became so normalized that we don't even question it. I mean, imagine if you put real bodies all over your house and bloody guts. I mean, is that like a cool, that's so weird. And ghosts and demons, like, it doesn't make sense to me. Now, Christmas was always my favorite holiday. I love the Christmas tree and the Christmas lights. Never cared for the presents. And I love just like cuddling and watching movies and stuff like that. So Christmas, I would say I did kind of like stop celebrating it traditionally because they did change it to what it was originally supposed to be. I don't believe that Jesus was born in December, at least from just the research I've done. So we're not even celebrating Jesus on Christmas. We're just celebrating some magical guy flying around giving out presents, whose name, if you scramble, like Santa scrambles into Satan. And he wears red. And it's super creepy. So, I don't like lying. I don't like pretending. I never did that little elf on the shelf thing. That's too much work anyway. I was always too lazy to do that. I remember like growing up in Russia, and the kids in the neighborhood would tell me all this weird stuff. Like, if you put a letter in your shoe, in your boot, if you write a letter to Santa or something, you'll wake up in the morning and it's going to be filled with candy. And then I would wake up in the morning and there'd be no candy in there, and I'd feel so stupid. And they would tell me all these things, like, if you do this, that will happen. None of it ever came true, and I always felt really dumb. So, like, when I became a mom, I just couldn't do that to my kid. And you know what? He never cared. He never cared about all these mainstream holidays. He never once wanted to sit on Santa's lap. I don't even think I have a single picture of him on someone's lap. I have a picture of me sitting on Santa's lap at a work party. I was a little drunk, but I don't think I have a single one of my son. So as far as Christmas, also, I feel like, why are we giving people gifts who don't even deserve it just because they're your family? Well, there's family members that don't even talk to you, but they feel entitled to presents. And then if you get them nothing, they have the nerve to say, well, where's my Christmas present? It's like, dude, you don't even talk to me. You literally ignore me to my face. Why would I get you a Christmas present? And I feel like Christmas is kind of spoiling a lot of people. Like, you already have your birthday. Is that not enough? Why are we getting you a million gifts? Like, people can barely survive nowadays. I'm just not about the whole millions of presents. I stopped doing the tree thing, but I still love lights. So I'll still put up like Christmas lights and stuff like that. And, you know, Christmas for me is just about cuddling on the couch and watching Christmas movies or family movies. Like Home Alone is one of my favorite movies. And it's hard, you know, you grew up with this stuff and it's hard to just abandon everything. But so we just try to just we have a fireplace and put on movies and we cuddle. Sometimes we make cookies and milk, and that's like my favorite thing about Christmas. It's really about spending time together. And I know you could say like, oh, it's about Jesus. Well, every day is about Jesus for me, so I don't need Christmas to do that. Jesus is the foundation of my life every single day. I don't wait until Christmas to celebrate his birth. And we also have, you know, church on Sundays and communion. So we have, you know, every day is Jesus Day for me. So for me, Christmas is just a warm holiday to spend with my son, which I should be doing more often. But what else? I think those are like the main holidays, really. I'm not a big holiday person, like in general, but those are like the main controversial ones for Christians. Okay, and the last thing that I didn't want to mention because my son was near me is the subject of intimacy. In the past, I mean, if you talk to most people these days, intimacy is like very, very overly promoted all over the place, right? In music, on TV, news, even schools now. And when I was younger, all I wanted was passion in a relationship, physical passion. And like in my first major relationship, I was missing that, but I had like security. It was a very comfortable relationship and safety and all that, and I felt like I could be myself. But I lacked the passion. And then after I left that relationship, I entered other relationships, and that was like number one on my list. But I ended up being in a relationship where I had that and everything else was broken. So now I had the complete opposite relationship where the passion and all that was there, but there was nothing else there. Like, we weren't getting along. We didn't see eye to eye. Our values were different, or at least as I got older, our values, just everything just separated more and more. And I learned to no longer value that physical intimacy anymore, or it's not like number one on my list. And now it's just like the last thing on my list, because I feel like I could live without it. I've lived without it for a few years, and there's so many other things that are so important in life than that. You know, family, health, God, just, you know, enjoying life, helping others. And before, that would have to be like, I would never get married without test driving the car. Whereas today, my viewpoint has completely changed, because if you surrender to God to find your spouse and you save yourself for that person, I believe that the passion will be there, the physical connection will be there, and you have to make sure everything else is there first. So like, your values have to be the same. You have to see eye to eye in a lot of things. You have to be able to communicate and trust each other, and God has to be in the center of the relationship. And then all that other stuff, that to me, that's like the cherry on top. And I've known many marriages that they've been together for so many decades. They don't even do that anymore, but they have to live together, so they just end up being like friends. And I'd rather have that than live with someone where there is physical connection, but you just can't stand each other and you can never get along. It's just, so that has changed. Just the fact that I discovered that you can save yourself, completely save yourself, and it's worked out for a lot of believers, and that they choose to be pure. And it's such a weird thing, because I just never thought I would do something like that, but now that's just what I believe, that you should be saving yourself, and it should be more promoted, to just, you know, because the Bible says when two people become intimate, they become one soul. And that really explains why so many people are in so many unhealthy relationships and they can't get out, because there's a spiritual connection there. And it's quite dangerous to just go around and doing that with random people, or even with, you know, a boyfriend or whatever. So I think just more people, there would be like less divorce if people just waited and focused on other things than that. And you would feel less used as well, because there's also like a relief in that, because in the past when I would date people, you would feel like this pressure of like, when should I initiate it? Should they initiate it? Should I wait? When is too soon? Are they gonna leave if I do it too soon? Are they gonna use me? It's just so much pressure that it just makes more sense to only do that with your spouse, where there's no more pressure if you're just getting to know each other, and then you choose your spouse and then you get married. That's it. Sorry if I'm rambling, but just wanted to share that is yet another thing that God changed within me, is that I no longer desire to like hook up or date even. I'm just living for him, and then if he finds me a spouse, that is the only way I would ever get remarried, and hopefully that would be like the one and only last time, because before that it was not godly. I wasn't a Christian back then. Okay, so I forgot to mention that another thing that God changed my desires about is alcohol. I barely ever drink alcohol, and I actually haven't had a drink in like 6 months. So I used to love drinking wine, but in the last 6 months, I just really felt God telling me to just like stop, just stop drinking. And the Bible tells us to be sober-minded. And so it wasn't something that I felt forced to do. I just felt called to do it. I just lost my desire for alcohol. I still have several bottles at home that I don't touch, so I'm not really tempted by it. On top of that, I have been getting migraines for the last few years, usually like once a month, but alcohol can also cause migraines, so it gave me another reason to just stay off of it. The final thing that I wanted to mention is the whole point of this video is that why does God do that? It's not just to be like some perfect Christian or any of that stuff. I truly believe that God starts to change you, and it says that even in the Bible that he starts to change you and renew your heart. And that's because ultimately he has a plan for you. And I spent 40 years of my life doing what I wanted, like dreaming and manifesting my own reality kind of thing. And God has to like undo all of that. He has to slowly change you and your desires, because the things that he hasn't planned for you are not the things that you would normally want to do. You'll hear that from a lot of people that felt called to do something by God. They did not want to do it. Sometimes takes them years to finally take the plunge, and that's because it takes time to prepare you for it. So I believe there's two reasons. One, he wants to bless you with something that, you know, let's say you're looking for a husband or something, but your husband, the man that God has chosen for you, is in a completely different state. Or your dream job in a completely different state. And if you're just going off of what you want and you want to live here and meet someone here, and God is like, no, you need to go over there, he has to prepare you for that. But if you don't follow his calling, then you'll never get his blessing. And the other part, I think, is because, again, he has plans for you. Those plans are not just for you to like live a happy life. I don't believe that. I believe he calls us to be out there and touch people's lives. He wants us to share the message of God with other people, to bring hope. So, and to help other people. You know, it could be helping poor people, homeless people, single moms, injured people, veterans, whatever the case is. He has plans for you, and it just may not be what you want to do. So it takes time, and this is why he prepares you and changes the things that you want. It's not ultimately like for you, it's for him. And you have to really be in tune with following his will and not your own, and not what you want to do. And so that's really why I'm even here. If you watched my previous videos, I mentioned I did not want to be on YouTube, but I felt very strongly that that's where God wanted me. What greater way to live than to have God guiding your life? Like truly trusting God of all people instead of yourself. Like, I'm just so grateful that I even found him. So I encourage you guys to seek God and to seek his will. It took me a few years to really see the plan slowly unfold, and I'm sure I still don't have the whole picture, but if you spend enough time with him and seeking him and his will, and he sees your heart, that you're truly seeking his will for you, and you surrender it to him, he will do the same for you. He will change you. He will help you with addictions and fears and all kinds of things, so that you will follow his will for your life. That's pretty much the main gist of this video. If you have any questions about anything else, let me know. Let me know how God has changed you, if there's any holidays that you no longer celebrate, or music or anything like that. Thanks for watching, and I've got more videos to come. Bye. I can't believe I didn't take a single sip of my drink.